Palantir earnings are upon us, folks. Yes, they are indeed, okay? Monday, August 7th, only a couple days from now. Palantir earnings will be coming out, the conference call, the whole deal. I thought in this video here today on the reaction channel, I would show you guys what analysts are expecting for this stock. I'm going to share what my expectations are for Palantir in terms of number side. Do I think they're going to miss numbers, beat numbers? What about for next quarter? What about for the following quarter? I'm going to tell you what I'm expecting to happen to the stock price. I'm going to give you a bearish scenario, a base case, and kind of a bullish scenario that I think is going to happen in the stock price overall, and many other various things, and why I believe those certain things. So appreciate everybody joining me as always. Thanks so much, folks. New all-time high in the history of the channel in terms of subscribers. I appreciate y'all being here. I apologize for not putting out content last few days. I was a little under the weather, so I only had enough energy to do like one video a day. So I've just been doing some videos on the main channel. So, but yeah, anyways, guys, I appreciate you joining me, and let's jump straight into this. And by the way, best of luck to all Palantir shareholders out there, whichever way you want it, whether you want it to go down because you want to buy more shares, you want it to go up to be up more in your position, best of luck with whatever scenario you're looking for, okay? By the way, just so you guys know, I put together a workshop for you a few nights ago. That's going to be the pinned comment down there if you want to access that. It's free. It's like a 28 to 30-minute workshop going through how I find 10x stocks. So the first thing I like to think about in regards to a stock I own is how's the setup going into earnings, okay? So Palantir is up about 184% year to date. That's an insane number, okay? Especially when we're only in the 8th month of the year. Like 184 flipping flapjack in percent is ridiculous, right? But the thing to remember with Palantir is going into this year, there was an extremely oversold stock. It was trading at just silly valuation metrics. Everybody had given up on the company other than a few of us diehard bulls that, really believe in the product that Palantir has and the balance sheet and, what Karp and the team's doing over there, right? So most people had given up on it. So the initial recovery, in my opinion, to about $10 a share, that was just an oversold recovery. Now, if we want to talk about the move from $10 to, let's say, $18 where it's at today, that's where bigger expectations start coming in for earnings and what people think is going to happen here, okay? But the more important thing than looking at a year to date, if you want to know how your stock is setting up going into earnings, look at just the past few trading days going into the earnings. That's going to tell you a lot more. And what do we see with Palantir? Big downward move going into these earnings, right? This is since Tuesday morning. The stock is down almost 10%. That's not a small move, folks. That's a pretty large move. I love that setup. I do not like a stock that going into the earnings over the few days before the earnings, it's like just going up and up and up. That doesn't make me feel too comfortable. If anything, I like to see weakness kind of going into those earnings, basically a few trailing days, and then hopefully set up for some upside there, right? And naturally going into an earnings, you're going to see some people take some profits in regards to the stock because there's a certain group of investors out there that their kind of investing religion is to actually not hold their stocks through an earnings period. Now, this is also more of a trading mentality, but there's certain folks that are like, you know what? It's not worth the risk, especially if my stock's been doing well. I don't want to hold it over earnings. If you know my investing philosophy, that's not at all the way I think, right? I want to hold my stocks through thick and thin. I want to hold them through earnings periods because you could say, well, yeah, a stock could go down 10, 20% in earnings. You know what else it could do? Go up 10 to 20% in earnings, and then you're stuck in a situation trying to say, okay, do I buy it now? Do I wait some more? And then you're like, well, maybe it'll go back down. You wait a little longer. Next thing you know, now it's up 30%. And you're like, come on, you got to go down, baby. And then it's up 40%, 50%, and you're like, oh. And especially in growth stocks, the moves can be parabolic. Look at Palantir. The stock's up 184% this year. If you got out of that stock at any point this year, you haven't even been able to get back in. You sold it at 8, thinking, okay, we're probably going to come back to 7, and then it went to 9 and 10 and 11. That's a hard game to play. So it's not the game I play, but you got to understand there's other people that play this game that way, okay? And then the way they think is, I'll get back in after earnings. Hopefully the stock pulls down, and I'll be able to time this out properly, okay? Like I said, that's more of a gambling mentality, in my personal opinion, but you got to understand there's a certain amount of people that do that out there, okay? Now, why I believe Palantir has seen weakness recently, I don't even think it has anything to do with the market or anything like that, because Palantir is going to run its own race. Stocks like Palantir, stocks like Tesla, they're going to run their own flip and flapjack and race. They don't care what's really going on in the market. These stocks can go on insane bearish moves and have insane bullish moves regardless of which way the market's going. They're just different stocks. They're built differently. We'll call it that, okay? The reason I believe Palantir stock has been seeing quite significant weakness since Tuesday, okay? Remember, Palantir has big expectations going into these earnings, right? There's a lot of excitement around AI products, what those are going to mean for Palantir's earnings. But we just got a stock that is tied into AI that had an absolute dumpster fire of earnings. And that stock is AMD. AMD reported earnings on, guess what? Tuesday. And on Tuesday, AMD reported a dumpster fire. The revenues were down 18%. The gross profit was down 19%. The operating income was down, it went to an operating loss, it was down 104%. And the EPS was down 93 flapjack%. That's a dumpster fire. Now, there's a lot of people that had big hopes for AMD in regards to AI. And they look at NVIDIA's numbers. NVIDIA numbers should be incredible, right? But the thing with AMD that you got to understand is AMD is more set to benefit from AI, it looks like, in 2024. If you're thinking about a 2023 beneficiary on the chip side, it really looks like NVIDIA got out in front of AMD by at least 6 to 18 months. And so the numbers you're going to see from AMD should get a lot better at the end of this year and ultimately going into 2024. And so I think there's a lot of people drawing to conclusions that because AMD's numbers are so bad and so disappointing and they're not seeing an AI uptick in their business so far, that therefore a company like Palantir is not going to see an uptick right now. And it's just a lot of people talking about doing this and doing that with AI, but it's not actually adding up to any dollars. So this is where you get into a real interesting situation with Palantir, where a lot of people are kind of scared and they're like, okay, Karp's been talking about all these people are calling them up and they all want to talk about the product and all these potential customers. But what if it's all just talk? What if it's not adding up to any substantial numbers? And when the stocks had a pretty parabolic move up nearly 200% this year, we expect to start doing numbers, not just like talking, right? Now, in regards to Palantir stock, there's 5 core things that Palantir shareholders pay attention to. And if you're somebody that's dove down the rabbit hole of Palantir over time, these are the 5 things that Palantir bulls all care about, pretty much as much, if not more than anything else. Okay, these 5 core things are how many new deals, what are the size of the new deals coming in, how big are those deals, right? What's the net dollar retention for the company? This is seen as a very important metric over the long term. People want to see, the higher over 100% you can be, the better is the way people look at it, right? And they kind of look at a company like Snowflake as kind of like the creme de la creme of like net dollar retention, right? Revenue growth, and if the company has anything to do with guidance, what are those guide numbers? Whether it be the next quarter, whether it be the next year, anything Karp and the team has to give around guidance is extremely important. Now, those are the 5 core things that everybody's going to be paying attention to at earnings and going to continue to. In my opinion, starting in 2024 and beyond, Palantir shareholders are also going to start paying much more attention to earnings per share growth. That's not really something that's seen as that important right now. Like a lot of people like that Palantir's getting to profitability. That's a good step in the right direction, and that's going to help us with S&P 500 inclusion. But that's not like of the important things for most Palantir bulls. That's not up there yet. Okay, it will be in future years. I can promise you that. Okay. Now, in terms of what Wall Street's expecting, then we'll get into my numbers and my expectations for what's going to actually happen with the stock price as well. Wall Street's expecting the company to report 5 cents of EPS this quarter, and then another 5 cents of EPS for next quarter as well, right? Which are substantial moves up on a percentage basis on a year-over-year basis. That's incredible, right? The company, as far as what Wall Street's expecting 12.6% revenue growth for this current quarter they're about to report here in the next couple days, and they're expecting 17.4% revenue growth next quarter. Overall, just under 16% revenue growth this year, and we can call it a little under 19% revenue growth for next year. Okay, now, what's my opinion on the numbers? Here's what I'm expecting as far as the numbers go. So, as far as EPS for the remainder of this year, I don't know. I don't have strong opinions on if they're going to beat those numbers, meet those numbers, miss those numbers. There's a lot that can change in regards to many different fronts in regards to EPS, so I don't have a strong opinion. I do believe they're going to have a big beat next year in regards to EPS, okay? Here's what I think. I think they're going to have a decent-sized beat for revenue growth this past quarter. I think they're going to probably have grown revenue somewhere between 14% and about 17% probably for this past quarter. I think a lot of the AI deals are really going to, in terms of all this interest, all this talk, I think it's really going to start piling up next quarter and as we go into the remainder of 23 and then especially in 24, in my opinion. So I'm not expecting crazy numbers for this past quarter. If we get crazy numbers for this past quarter, oh my gosh, look out, because that means things are transpiring much faster than really anybody anticipated, okay? So once again, I'm kind of expecting that 14 to 16, maybe 17% type growth for this past quarter, so a decent size beat. Next quarter, I'm expecting a big beat. I'm thinking like 25% revenue growth, if not above that next quarter, where the street's at 17%, okay? So I think they're going to be substantially above that. Overall for this year, I'm expecting a big beat because once again, I think the remaining of the year is going to be much stronger revenue-wise than what analysts are anticipating. And then next year, I'm expecting a huge beat. I'm expecting 30% plus revenue growth next year for the company, 30% plus. Analysts are at 18.7%, right? So if that plays out, obviously it's going to be very good. We'll talk about the stock price in just a moment and kind of my expectations around that. But that's basically, I think it's a story of things are going to get much better than folks anticipate. It's just a big question is what does Karp have to say in terms of detail around future quarters and future years, okay? So once again, decent beat this quarter, big beat next quarter in terms of what their expectations are going to be, big beat for overall this year, and then I think a massive beat is coming in 2024. That's my opinion on that side of things, okay? Now, Palantir in terms of stock, it just reached a pretty exciting phase for me personally because we just crossed over. Now we've made more in profit from Palantir than I've actually put into the stock in the public account, right? I put $49,000 into it, and we're now sitting on almost $52,000 of gains. It's a very exciting time whenever you cross that threshold of like you've made more in profit in the stock than you've actually put into the stock. But the thing I think is important, although that's a cool thing to have happen there, I think an important thing to remember, especially in regards to Palantir or any company that you think has a long runway of growth for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, is you got to understand once you cross that threshold, you still probably have little money. And I'll give you a good example. Like Elf is a good example of a stock that, you know, when it started hitting those type of thresholds, I started cashing shares, selling shares, right? Even though I thought Elf had a long 5, 10, 15 year runway of growth, I was just so excited to take my profits, and I took profits, right? Obviously, I should have never sold a share of Elf, right? Now we're sitting at over 16 times what I put in this stock. I'm in profit for Elf now at this point in time, okay? And so just keep in mind, instead of $120,000 gain on the shares and all the profits I took over time, you know, we should be sitting at a $1.2 million gain or something like that in regards to Elf total, right? And so you just got to, you know, let these things kind of play out. You know, a lot of people are very quick, especially, you know, because it is sweet to see something like that. And you're like, dang, man, I've made more in the stock than I put in the stock. So cool. But you just got to understand with companies that are, if it's truly a game-changing company, you know, there's a good saying with like a company like Apple, for instance, over the past 20 years, own it, don't trade it, right? And so I just think that's an important subject to bring up, okay? Now, Palantir in 7 days. What is this stock price looking at? I got 3 different scenarios here played out, okay? So, I have a bearish scenario, I have a base case, and I have a bullish case for what I think Palantir's stock price is going to be in 7 days from now, okay? So first off, let's show the bear case. The bear case is this stock is $15 a share in 7 days, okay? Now, what would have to happen for the stock to be $15? If they just come in and meet numbers, they don't give any concrete numbers that are exciting for next quarter or next year or anything like that, $15. We're going down. That would be extremely disappointing, right? Like I said, a lot of this move from 10 to 18 is people expecting better numbers than what analysts are expecting for the stock, a much better story, much more profitable company, a much bigger revenue company, and a company that's going to attract a lot more customers than was anticipated 3 months ago or 6 months ago, right? So yeah, if things just come in and they're just okay, that's not going to cut it. We're going back down to 15 in that sort of scenario. Do I see a scenario where we go back down to 12 or 10? Super unrealistic. I'd call it less than a 2% probability, but it is a possibility, right? You know, everything's a possibility in the stock market. That type of scenario would need to be it's like they're not growing their business or something like just insane to think about, or they're not profitable anymore, so S&P 500 inclusion gets thrown out the door, like something crazy. Like I said, less than a 2% probability would go to 10 to 12, but Always a possibility. I think the more realistic scenario for the bear case is like 15 after earnings, okay? What about the base case for the stock? The base case for the stock, in my opinion, is $20 a share. Now, what would happen in the base case for the stock to be at $20 in 7 days from now? Right now, it's at about 18. I think we could see pretty good earnings, pretty good guidance, pretty upbeat Karp, pretty upbeat team, good amount of new customers at it. Expectations are pretty good. Nothing shocking with earnings, no NVIDIA type moment where it's like, oh my gosh, we're expected to grow 6% and they're growing 60%. What? Okay. That would be base case. Just really good numbers, like basically kind of what I laid out for you guys, right? That's the scenario that gets us to 20. Now, we could pop initially above 20, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see some profit takers. Like, let's say the stock pops to 22, 23. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some profit takers. Remember what I spoke about at the beginning, actually just a few minutes ago. I spoke about a lot of people, or when they made a nice profit and they doubled up their money, they like to take some profits, right? Or they like to take their initial chips off the table if they like to look at it kind of like from a gambling perspective, right? Like, let me take my initial chips off the table. And so that's something I could see coming in next week, that the stock could maybe trade a little lower after the initial pop in the earnings if we got like a big pop. So that's kind of my base case for where I think the stock prices go, okay? Now let's go through the bull case and what the stock price is for a very bullish scenario for the stock. I think this one's going to be pretty fun for folks, okay? And this is, I will say, it's very, very, very bullish if this plays out, okay? And I'll tell you what it's going to take to have this happen. $27. So, in order for the stock to go to $27, I think you need to have a NVIDIA type moment where the company is just growing far faster than bulls anticipated, than Wall Street anticipated, like so much more quickly. It is like shocking to people. Like, oh my gosh, like all this stuff Karp's been saying, like they're really going to put it up. Like if Karp comes out and says, guys, we're going to get back to growing 30% plus a year starting in 2024. If he says something like that, game changer, right? No one on Wall Street has this company projected to start growing revenues again 30+%. If he says our profitability is about to go to the moon next year, like those are the type of situations and moments you can get in a stock to just have an insanity move, where the stock pops initially to 25 and then it continues to see momentum throughout the trading week, and the next thing you know, by Friday it's like a $27 stock. So, but it needs to be a shock and awe moment on the good side, like an NVIDIA type moment where everybody's just like, oh my gosh, like Palantir, they were talking all that stuff and they really backed it up. They really backed it up in that sort of scenario, because that would be a scenario where even the people that are thinking about taking profits would be like, oh, hell no. Like, this is way too much of a rocket ship. I'm crazy to take some profits now. And then bull money on the sideline would be just flooding into that baby because they're like, I got to get on this rocket ship now. Like, the whole game's been changed in regards to Palantir, right? And then you get a lot of that Wall Street money start to really pay attention. Like, if they had a shock and awe event, everybody next week's going to be talking about that. Because next week sets up pretty well. You got a few important companies reporting, but you don't have any, like, you don't have an NVIDIA report next week. You don't have an Apple or an Amazon or a Meta, a Tesla, someone that could take the tension away. The Fed's not making any decision next week. So if Palantir had a shock and awe moment for earnings, it would dominate the headlines the entire flip and flapjacking week. But it would have to be a shock and awe moment. And then everybody, it would be the number one stock talked about on CNBC and everywhere. Oh, did you see who Palantir put up? And everybody would be giving their opinions and things like that. But we'll see. They would have Dan Ives on. Hey, Dan, you came out with that note, $25. Look at the stock. It's already at your price target. What do you think about this? What do you think about the earnings? Boom, boom, boom. They would have a bunch of Palantir bulls on speaking about the stock. So there'd be a very interesting moment. But that's what you would need to see, that sort of move in the stock overall, okay? Best of luck to everybody out there. You know me, if the stock dips in any substantial way and I like the fundamentals, I'm going to likely be a buyer of more shares. So that's kind of my perspective. I appreciate everybody joining me as always. Make sure you check out pinned comment down there, guys. Get my free workshop I put together for you, how I find 10x stocks. It's about a 28 to 30 minute video. Should get a lot of value out of that one, folks. Much love and have a great day.